Captain Jake Morrison stared at the green dots on his screen. 3 weeks into their mission, the crew of the Starbound had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. The Kepler 442 system was supposed to be quiet, just another routine survey. Job for the human exploration fleet. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Ben Carter from his station. The young officer's voice carried a hint of excitement that made Morrison look up from his coffee. "What kind of strange, Ben?" "It's a distress signal, sir, but it's not using any frequency we know about." Morrison set down his cup and walked over to Carter's station. The tactical display showed a weak signal coming from the outer edge of the system near the fourth planet. Whatever was sending it was trying very hard to be heard. "Amy, what do you think?" Morrison asked his second-in-command. "Commander." Amy Phillips studied the readings with her usual careful attention. She had been with Morrison for 5 years, and he trusted her judgment more than anyone else on the ship. "It could be a trap, Jake. We're a long way from home." "Could be," Morrison agreed. "But if someone really needs help out here, we might be their only chance." He turned to the helm officer. "Set course for that signal, best speed." The Starbound changed direction, its engines humming quietly in the darkness. As they got closer, their sensors began to pick up more details. The source of the signal was definitely a ship, but its design was unlike anything in human databases. "Captain, you need to see this," called Dr. Lisa Grant from the science station. The xenobiologist had been studying the readings for the past hour, her face growing more concerned with each passing minute. Morrison walked over to her station. On the screen was a 3-dimensional image of the alien vessel. It was beautiful in a strange way, with flowing curves that reminded him of ocean waves. But something was wrong with it. Whole sections were dark and debris floated around its hull. "Whoever built this knows how to make things pretty," Morrison said, "but they've taken a beating." "The ship's hull is made from some kind of organic material," Dr. Grant explained. "It's almost like it was grown rather than built. And Jake, there are life signs aboard, but they're weak." Morrison nodded. "Open a channel. Let's see if we can talk to them." The communication attempt took several minutes. The alien ship's systems were damaged, and their technology was completely different from human designs. Finally, a scratchy signal came through the speakers. The sound that emerged was unlike anything the crew had heard before. It was a series of clicks and whistles, beautiful but clearly distressed. Morrison looked at Dr. Grant, who was already working at her station. "I'm running it through our translation programs," she said. "Give me a minute." While they waited, Morrison studied the alien ship more carefully. It was big, easily twice the size of the Starbound, but it seemed to be built for carrying people, rather than fighting. There were no visible weapons, and the hull design looked more like a passenger vessel than a warship. "Got something," Dr. Grant announced. "The translation isn't perfect, but I think they're asking for help. They keep using words that might mean safe and children." "Children?" Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be with this equipment." "Captain, I think we need to get over there." Morrison made his decision quickly. "Amy, take a team and prepare for boarding, full environmental suits, and bring medical supplies. Ben, I want you to keep our weapons ready, but don't power them up unless I give the order." "Sir, shouldn't we call for backup first?" Phillips asked. "This could be dangerous." Morrison looked at the damaged alien ship on his screen. Whatever had happened to these people, they had been through hell to get here. "If they wanted to hurt us, Amy, I don't think they'd be sending out distress calls. These people need help, and we're going to give it to them." An hour later, Morrison found himself floating in the airlock of the alien vessel. The inside of the ship was as strange as the outside. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint light, and the air had a sweet smell that reminded him of flowers. But there was also the sharp scent of fear and pain. Dr. Grant's readings had been right. The ship was designed to carry passengers, and it had been carrying a lot of them. But now the corridors felt empty, too quiet for a vessel this size. They found the survivors in what looked like a medical bay. There were 12 of them, and Morrison's first thought was that they looked like tall, graceful deer. They had long, thin limbs and faces that were almost human, but not quite. Most striking were the crystalline growths on their heads like antlers made of living glass that glowed with soft blue light. The aliens were clearly afraid. They huddled together in the corner of the room, their antler lights dim with fear. When they saw the humans, several of them made soft crying sounds. Dr. Grant stepped forward slowly, her hands empty and visible. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're here to help." One of the aliens, older than the others with silver fur and antlers that had seen many years, stepped forward. It began to speak in those clicking, whistling sounds. Dr. Grant held up her translation device, and after a moment, words began to appear on the small screen. "We are Zilani," the device translated. "We ask for safe place. The Korthak come, they take, they hurt." Morrison felt his stomach tighten. "Ask them what the Korthak took." Dr. Grant typed into her device, and it produced a series of sounds. The ECI. Old Zilani's response was immediate and heartbreaking. Even without translation, Morrison could hear the pain in those alien sounds. The translation came through in broken phrases. "Young ones. Our children. Korthak take children, use them, hurt them, we run, we try to save who we can." The silence in the medical bay was complete. Morrison looked at his crew and saw his own horror reflected in their faces. Amy Phillips, who had 2 children, back on Earth, had gone pale. Ben Carter's hands were clenched into fists. "Where are your children now?" Morrison asked quietly. The old Zilani's antlers dimmed to almost nothing. When the translation came, it was barely a whisper. "Gone. Taken to Korthak worlds. Made into slaves. Made into soldiers. Some killed for refusing." Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his decision was already made. "Dr. Grant, I want you to get these people aboard our ship. Give them medical attention and make them comfortable. Amy, send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we have a situation that requires immediate attention." "What kind of situation, sir?" Phillips asked. Morrison looked at the frightened aliens, thinking about children being torn from their families by creatures that saw them as nothing more than tools to be used. "Tell them we've just learned about a species that makes war on children. And tell them that Captain Jake Morrison and the crew of the Starbound are going to do something about it." The old Zilani seemed to understand something in Morrison's tone, even without translation. For the first time since the humans had arrived, the aliens' antlers began to glow a little brighter. The emergency session of the United Earth Council had been called at 4 a.m, Earth time. President Daniel Brooks stood before the assembled representatives, his face grim as he shared the recordings that Captain Morrison had sent from the Starbound. The holographic display showed the Zilani refugees, their crystalline antlers dim with grief as they spoke about their stolen children. When the translation played their words about youngsters being turned into slaves and soldiers, several council members looked away. Representative Maria Santos from the South American Federation had tears in her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Brooks said, his voice steady but angry, "we've always wondered what humanity's role would be when we finally joined the greater galactic community. I believe we have our answer." Admiral Susan Kane sat in the front row, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. She had served in 3 wars and commanded fleets across human space. But the look in her eyes was something new. It was the look of a mother whose own child had been threatened. "Mr. President," said Representative Chen from the Asian Coalition, "surely we should be cautious. We know nothing about this Korthak Empire. They could have weapons we can't imagine." Brooks nodded. "That's a fair point. Admiral Kane, what are your thoughts?" Kane stood up slowly. "With respect, Representative Chen, there are some things that don't require caution. When someone hurts children, you don't stop to ask how big they are or how many friends they have. You stop them." The room fell silent. Kane had lost her own daughter in a transport accident 5 years earlier, and everyone knew it had changed her. Some said it had made her harder. Others said it had made her more human. "Admiral," President Brooks said, "I'm authorizing you to mobilize every available ship in the human defense fleet. We're going to bring those children home." Meanwhile, 3 star systems away, Captain Ryan Torres received his orders aboard the Phoebe heavy cruiser Defiance. Torres was Kane's best officer, a man who had fought pirates along the Outer Rim and never lost a ship under his command. But this mission was different from anything he had done before. "Sir," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Kelly Moore, "Admiral Kane wants to speak with you privately." Torres walked to his ready room and activated the secure channel. Kane's face appeared on his screen, and he could see the weight of command in her eyes. "Ryan, I'm sending you on a reconnaissance mission into Korthak space," she said without preamble. "I need to know what we're up against, and I need to know where those children are being held." "Understood, Admiral. What about the rest of the fleet?" "I'm bringing everyone home, Ryan. Every ship, every crew. We're going to need them all." Kane paused. "And Ryan? Be careful. We can't save anyone if we lose you in the process." Torres nodded. "We'll get the information you need, ma'am." Back on Earth, Dr. Martin Hayes was working around the clock in his laboratory at the Xenological Institute. Hayes had spent his career studying alien psychology, but the Korthak were unlike anything in his files. The Zelani survivors had provided what information they could, but much of it was filtered through fear and trauma. "They hunt in packs," Hayes explained to his research team. "Like wolves, but worse. They see strength as the only virtue worth having. Taking enemy children serves two purposes for them. It breaks the spirit of the parents, and it gives them new soldiers to train from birth." Dr. Jennifer Walsh, his assistant, looked up from her notes. "But why children? Why not just kill everyone?" Hayes pulled up a holographic model of Korthak's social structure. "Because children can be shaped. Adults have fixed loyalties, fixed beliefs. But a child taken young enough can be made to believe anything. The Korthak aren't just conquering worlds. They're building an empire of converted soldiers who will fight for them without question." The implications were horrifying. Across human space, the news of the Zelani refugees and their stolen children spread like wildfire. On Mars, factory workers volunteered for military service in record numbers. On the Jupiter colonies, families donated their savings to support the war effort. Children on every human world went to bed, clutching their parents a little tighter. "Captain, Torres and the Defiant slipped into Korthak space using a route suggested by the Zelani. The journey took 12 days through the dark spaces between stars, following paths that were more hope than certainty. When they finally reached the edge of Korthak territory, what they found changed everything. "Captain, you need to see this," called his sensor officer, Ensign Bobby Chen. The young man's voice was shaking. Torres looked at the tactical display and felt his blood turn cold. The planet below them was covered in massive structures, each one the size of a city. His ship's sensors were picking up thousands of life signs, not just Korthak but dozens of other species as well. "Are those prison camps?" Torres asked. "Worse, sir," Chen replied. "I'm reading organized facilities, training grounds, barracks. This isn't just imprisonment, it's indoctrination on a massive scale." Torres ordered his crew to gather as much information as possible without being detected. For 6 hours they mapped the planet's surface, recording everything they could see. The scope of the Korthak operation was beyond anything they had imagined. There were Zelani children, their beautiful, antlers cut short and replaced with control devices. There were youngsters from species they didn't recognize, all wearing the same gray uniforms and moving in perfect formation. Worst of all were the older ones, teenagers who had been there long enough to have their spirits completely broken. "Captain," said his communications officer, "I'm picking up transmissions from the surface. The translation software is having trouble, but it sounds like they're conducting some kind of training exercise." Torres listened to the alien voices for a moment, then made his decision. "That's enough. We've seen what we came to see. Set course for home, best possible speed." As the Defiant slipped away from the horror planet, Torres composed his report to Admiral Kane. The words came slowly, each one heavier than the last. The Korthak Empire wasn't just taking children, they were creating an army of them. Thousands upon thousands of young beings from across the galaxy, all trained to fight for their captors. It was slavery of the worst kind, the theft of innocence itself. When Kane received Torres's report, she called President Brooks immediately. The conversation was brief and to the point. Mr. President, we now know what we're facing. The Korthak have turned child stealing into an industry. We're not just talking about a few hundred victims, we're talking about tens of thousands. Brooks was quiet for a long moment. Admiral, I want you to prepare for full-scale military action. And I want you to send a message to every government in human space. Tell them that as of today, humanity has one primary law that supersedes all others. No one hurts children while we have the power to stop them. And if other species try to stay neutral? Kane asked. Then they'll learn what it means to stand against humanity when we're protecting the innocent. We're done being the new kids in the galaxy, Susan. It's time to show everyone what we're really made of. Across human space, the war drums began to beat. Captain Elena Rodriguez crouched in the cargo hold of the Ghost Runner, checking her equipment one last time. The modified freighter looked like any other merchant vessel from the outside, but inside, it carried 20 of humanity's best soldiers and one very nervous child psychologist. Dr. Foster, you sure you want to do this? Rodriguez asked the woman sitting across from her. Dr. Karen Foster had never been in combat before, but when Admiral Kane had asked for volunteers to help with the rescued children, she had been the first to sign up. Those children have been hurt in ways we can barely imagine, Foster replied, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. They're going to need someone who understands trauma, not just soldiers with guns. Sergeant Alex Murphy finished loading his demolition charges and looked up. Ma'am, with respect, understanding won't matter much if we can't get to them alive. Rodriguez nodded. Murphy had volunteered for this mission after learning about the Korthak child soldiers. His own nephew had been killed in a transport accident 2 years ago, and everyone knew he carried that pain with him. Alex is right, Doc, but we're going to need you once we get inside those facilities. The kids won't trust us at first. The Ghost Runner shuddered slightly as it dropped out of hyperspace near Korthak Prime. Through the small porthole, Rodriguez could see the massive planet that Torres had reported on. Even from orbit, the prison facilities were visible as dark scars across the surface. Captain Rodriguez, came the voice of their pilot over the intercom. We're receiving the standard merchant traffic control signals. Our fake cargo manifest is holding up so far. Good. Take us down to landing pad 7 just like we planned. While Rodriguez and her team prepared for their infiltration mission, Admiral Kane led the main human fleet in a desperate battle, high above the planet. The Korthak had been expecting an attack ever since human ships started appearing in their territory, but they hadn't expected the fury that came with it. Captain Torres, now commanding the rebuilt Defiance II, watched as 3 Korthak battleships moved to intercept his squadron. The alien vessels were larger than human ships with thick armor and powerful weapons, but they had never faced an enemy that fought with the rage of parents protecting their children. All ships, this is Torres, he broadcast to his squadron. Remember why we're here. Every minute we hold them off is another minute for Rodriguez to get those kids out. The space battle was brutal and fast. Korthak weapons tore through human shields like paper, but human ships moved with a desperate speed that caught their enemies off guard. When the Defiance II took a direct hit that knocked out its main engines, Torres didn't hesitate. All hands, prepare for ramming speed. He ordered. We're going to punch a hole in their defensive line. Sir, that's suicide, his tactical officer protested. Torres looked at the tactical display showing the Korthak battleship ahead of them. Behind it, rescue shuttles were waiting to evacuate the children that Rodriguez's team would hopefully free. Maybe, but those kids aren't going to save themselves. The Defiance II slammed into the Korthak battleship at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the dark space around the planet. But the sacrifice worked. The defensive line was broken and the rescue shuttles could reach the surface. Down on the planet, Rodriguez and her team had made it inside the largest detention facility. The building was a nightmare of gray walls and endless corridors filled with the sound of marching feet. Young voices called out commands in the Korthak language, their words sharp and military. This way, Murphy whispered, following the facility map they had stolen from a guard post. The youngest children should be in Section C. They moved through the hallways like ghosts, avoiding Korthak guards and staying in the shadows. The few adult guards they encountered were dealt with quickly and quietly, but it was the sound of children's voices that made their hearts heavy. Young beings from dozens of species, all speaking in the harsh tones of soldiers. When they reached Section C, Rodriguez felt her stomach drop. Through the observation windows, she could see hundreds of children in identical gray uniforms. Some were Zilani with their antlers cut short. Others were species she didn't recognize. All of them moved with the same mechanical precision. "How do we get them out?" Murphy asked. "There are too many to carry, and they don't even know they need to be rescued." Dr. Foster stepped forward, studying the children through the window. "We start with one, find the youngest, the one who might still remember what it was like before." They entered the dormitory carefully. The children immediately formed ranks, standing at attention like tiny soldiers. Their eyes were empty, showing no curiosity about the strange aliens who had just walked into their world. Rodriguez felt sick. These weren't children anymore. They were weapons shaped like children. But Dr. Foster saw something else. In the back row, a small Zilani girl was standing slightly out of line. Her antlers were just starting to grow back, creating tiny points of light on her head. Unlike the others, her eyes showed a flicker of something. Fear, maybe, or hope. Foster approached slowly, her hands visible and empty. "Hello," she said softly. "My name is Karen." The little girl looked confused. None of the Korthak had ever spoken to her with kindness. The other children remained motionless, but she took a tiny step forward. "What's your name?" Foster asked. The girl's mouth moved silently at first. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Shimmer of Starlight." It was the first time anyone had used her real name in 3 years. Foster knelt down to the girl's level. "That's a beautiful name. Shimmer of Starlight, would you like to go home?" The little girl's antlers began to glow brighter. Around her, other children started to notice. Some of them remembered having names that weren't just numbers. Some of them remembered parents who had held them when they were scared. "Home?" Shimmer of Starlight whispered. "Yes," Foster said. "Your parents are looking for you. They never stopped looking." The effect spread like ripples in a pond. Children began to remember who they had been before the gray uniforms and the endless drills. Tears started to fall from alien eyes that hadn't cried in years. But their rescue was just beginning. Alarms started blaring throughout the facility as Korthak guards discovered the infiltration. Rodriguez grabbed her weapon and looked at Murphy. "How long do you need to get the kids ready to move?" she asked Foster. Foster looked at the hundreds of children who were slowly remembering how to be children again. "Give me 10 minutes. Murphy checked his explosive charges. "We might not have 10 minutes. Rodriguez activated her communication device. "All teams, this is Alpha. We have the children, but we need immediate extraction. How long until the shuttles arrive?" The response came, backfilled with static and the sound of weapons fire. "Rodriguez, this is Admiral Kane. Torres punched us a hole, but it won't stay open long. You have maybe 20 minutes before the Korthak reorganize their defenses. 20 minutes to save thousands of children who had forgotten how to trust. 20 minutes to undo years of conditioning and fear. 20 minutes to prove that sometimes the galaxy's newest voice could see what older civilizations had chosen to ignore." Rodriguez looked at Dr. Foster, who was now surrounded by dozens of children clinging to her like she was their salvation. "Doc, you better work fast. We're about to have company." Outside, the sound of Korthak reinforcements grew louder, but inside that gray dormitory, something wonderful was happening. Children were remembering their names. 6 months after the rescue at Korthak Prime, Ambassador Patricia Wells stood before the Galactic Council on the ancient world of Nexus Station. The council chamber was a massive dome filled with representatives from over 200 species, all watching the human ambassador with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The rescue had been successful, but barely. Rodriguez and her team had evacuated over 3,000 children from 47 different species, but the cost had been high. Captain Torres and the crew of the Defiance II were gone, along with dozens of other ships and their crews. The Korthak Empire was wounded, but not destroyed. Honored representatives, Wells began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. We are here today because the galaxy has a problem. For too long, we have allowed evil to flourish because it was inconvenient to stop it. The Arconian delegate, a tall insect-like being with compound eyes, clicked his mandibles in disapproval. Ambassador Wells, the human species has been part of the galactic community for less than 50 years. Perhaps you should learn our ways before trying to change them. Wells smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Your ways? Your ways allowed the Korthak to steal children for over 2 centuries. Your ways let thousands of youngsters be turned into weapons while you debated trade agreements and border disputes. She activated a holographic display that showed the rescued children. Some were still recovering in human medical facilities, slowly learning to trust again. Others had been reunited with their families, but the scars would last forever. These children represent 47 different species. Wells continued. 47 civilizations that the Korthak Empire had hurt. And where was the Galactic Council? Where were the peacekeepers and the trade sanctions and the diplomatic protests? The chamber fell silent. Representative Velton of the Hegemony, one of the oldest and most respected voices on the council, finally spoke. The situation with the Korthak was complex. There were economic considerations, strategic balances that had to be maintained. Economic considerations? Wells's voice rose. Strategic balances? We're talking about children being tortured and brainwashed, and you were worried about your trade routes? The Centaurian delegate leaned forward in his floating chair. Ambassador Wells, you must understand that the galaxy is vast and complicated. Not every problem can be solved with military force. Wells nodded slowly. You're right. Not every problem can be solved with force, but this one could have been and should have been centuries ago. Instead, you chose to look the other way because it was easier. She walked to the center of the chamber, addressing not just the delegates but the billions of beings watching, the broadcast across the galaxy. Today, I am announcing a new law that humanity will follow, regardless of what this council decides. Any species, any government, any empire that deliberately harms children will face humanity's full response. We don't care how old your civilization is, how powerful your military is, or how important your trade agreements are. The chamber erupted in angry voices. The hegemony delegate demanded order, while others protested that humans couldn't simply declare their own laws for the galaxy. Wells waited for the noise to die down, then continued. We're not asking for your permission. We're telling you what we're going to do. From this day forward, the protection of children is humanity's first and highest law. 3 years later, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Earth, humanity's newest and largest battleship. The war with the Korthak Empire was finally over, but it had changed everything. Dozens of species that had lived in fear for generations had joined the human-led coalition, inspired by humanity's willingness to fight for principles rather than profit. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the surface, reported Lieutenant Bobby Chen, now serving as Morrison's communications officer after being promoted following his service with Captain Torres. Put it through, Morrison said. The view screen showed a young Zilani female standing in what looked like a rebuilt city. Her antlers were tall and bright, glowing with healthy blue light. Morrison recognized her immediately. It was Shimmer of Starlight, the little girl that Dr. Foster had first reached during the rescue. Admiral Morrison, she said in perfect English, I wanted to thank you personally before the ceremony begins. Morrison smiled. The thanks belong to Captain Torres and all the others who didn't make it home, Shimmer. We just did what needed to be done. What you did was show the galaxy that some things are more important than politics or profit, she replied. Today, when we sign the Galactic Sanctuary Accords, we're not just making new laws. We're changing what it means to be civilized. The ceremony that followed was broadcast to every world in known space. One by one, species that had remained neutral during the Korthak conflict stepped forward to sign the accords. Even some of the older civilizations that had initially opposed humanity's actions now admitted that they had been wrong. The accords were simple in principle, but revolutionary in practice. Any species that signed agreed to protect children everywhere, not just their own. They agreed to share resources and military support to stop anyone who would harm the young. Most importantly, they agreed that some moral laws were more important than political convenience. Dr. Karen Foster, now director of the Galactic Child Recovery Foundation, watched the ceremony from Earth. Around her were dozens of the children they had rescued, now healthy and happy but never forgetting what they had survived. Many of them had become advocates themselves, working to make sure no other children would suffer as they had. Dr. Foster asked one of her assistants, "Do you really think this will work? Can we really change how the galaxy thinks about protecting children?" Foster looked at shimmer of starlight on the view screen, now a confident young woman who had become a symbol of hope across dozens of worlds. "We already have," she said. "The hardest part was convincing people that it was worth fighting for. Now everyone knows." That evening, Morrison walked through the Garden of Remembrance on Earth, where monuments honored those who had died in what history would call the Children's War. The names of Captain Torres, Lieutenant Colonel Johnson, and thousands of others were carved in black stone that reflected the stars above. As he stood before Torres's memorial, Morrison heard the sound of laughter. He turned to see human and alien children playing together in the garden, their games creating a joyful noise that echoed off the memorial walls. An older woman approached him. It was Admiral Kane, now retired but still carrying herself with military precision. "They're beautiful, aren't they?" she said, watching the children play. "They are," Morrison agreed. "Torres would have liked seeing this." Kane nodded. He knew what he was doing when he rammed that Korthak ship. He knew those children would have this chance to grow up free. Morrison looked up at the stars, thinking about all the worlds out there where children now played safely because humanity had decided that some things were worth any price. "The galaxy has lots of rules," he said quietly. "Rules about trade, about borders, about who can do what and where. But we taught them that there's one rule that comes before all the others. Never hurt children," Kane said. "Never hurt children," Morrison agreed, "because humanity is watching." Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy that had learned a new kind of civilization, one where the protection of innocence was more important than the convenience of the powerful. It was humanity's gift to the universe, paid for in blood but worth every drop.